Today on In the Money, I'm joined by Kevin Lee, co-founder and co-CEO of Immi, the high-protein, low-carb instant ramen brand reinventing one of the world's most beloved comfort foods. Kevin's journey is one of blending tech discipline with food innovation. A former product manager turned founder, Kevin and his co-founder launched Immi in 2021, taking a sleepy $50 billion instant noodle category and reimagining it for a new generation of health-conscious eaters. In this episode, we talk about how Immi evolved its brand identity from healthy ramen to craveable taste-first storytelling, what Kevin learned about product market fit, margins, and channel mix from scaling D2C to 6,000 retail doors, the reality of operating margins in food and how every point of profit cuts into consumer health, and how celebrity investors like Naomi Osaka and Usher fit into the company's mission. Welcome to In the Money, an exploration of whether you can still make money in D2C and CPG. We talk to some of the most interesting $5 million to $50 million founders, operators, investors, and acquirers in the space to ultimately answer the question, is D2C and CPG still a good business? Hope you'll enjoy the show. Coming from tech, for both you and your co-founder, I imagine there were a lot of learnings, best practices, and mental models that you would have kind of grown up with. Has there been stuff that's been unexpected running a consumer products business coming from tech?
Yes, a lot. I think that my co-founder and I, when we were in tech, we were both product managers and then I switched into venture capital, but he stayed in product management his entire tech career. And I think that oftentimes when you're siloed in tech, even as a product manager, you don't often have to worry too much about brand positioning. Like, yes, there's elements of product marketing, but to a certain extent, at least back in the day, if you built an amazing product, the people would come. I don't know if that's necessarily true anymore with kind of how low the moats have gone in software. But I think that was actually very surprising was over the past couple of years, Kei-Chen and I call him Kei-Chen, his name is also Kevin, but we just go by our first initial last name. Him and I have realized just how important it is to think through things like brand positioning. It's almost like the fundamental marketing strategies that they'll teach you in business school, which I never went to, but you realize that a lot of this stuff, it's when you position in the market in a consumer's mind, that's they'll describe you that way forever. And it's really difficult to change that positioning without deliberate intent, deliberate initiatives throughout the year. And so exercising that part of our brain was actually pretty difficult for us because a lot of times it's very much art versus science. Some folks might argue otherwise. To us, it felt very much like an art, and we're still learning that every day. So needing to constantly switch gears outside of just focusing on excellent product, excellent operations, finance, to this more touchy-feely side of the business, it has been a journey, that is for sure.
I remember when, or at least around when Immi launched, the brand looked beautiful and the copy was really creative. So it's interesting to hear you guys mention that it's been a journey because it seems so strong out of the gate. Did you guys have help with that, with an external party? Was that mostly the two of you?
We definitely did get help. I think Kei-Chen and I knew that wasn't our background. So we worked with a branding agency based out of Brooklyn called Gander. They have done pretty much all the brand work for Magic Spoon, Raza, Bonza, a lot of the recently Ben Stiller's new kind of healthy soda brand. So they gave us a huge leg up with the initial brand universe, brand identity. But like most branding agencies, they typically give you a brand book as a deliverable, and then it's up to you to figure out how to execute against that. And that really was that big kind of oh my God, what now feeling we got after the engagement ended, where we had to figure out how to translate this PDF into, the working elements of the brand on a day-to-day, how we tell the brand stories, how it shows up visually across every channel. So yeah, I think, luckily I think Kei-Chen and I hopefully have some sort of taste, some sort of intuition. And we now have an incredible team, a great designer who's really translated a lot of that work. But yeah, maybe we're just our own harshest critic, and we don't recognize our own strengths, and that maybe that's a funny reason of why you say it looks good, but maybe we don't feel that way because we're always trying to improve.
You said that it's been a bit of a journey. Have there been kind of material evolutions of the storytelling, or has the core kind of been pretty consistent and you've largely just evolved around the edges?
There has. I think people just forgot because we do change kind of over the years. So our first year, we didn't listen to our intuition, and we thought that a lot of the brand storytelling had to be, oriented around who we thought our core customer was. And at the time, it was this very health and wellness, think like fitness mom from bi-coastal regions doing the Peloton, and they care a lot about their health. And so a lot of our content, a lot of how we showed it visually was all this kind of woo woo, very like yoga soul cycling language, the imagery, the types of posts we made. And there was like a period within that first year where we looked at each other and we said, you know what, this is not us. It feels extremely fake, extremely inauthentic. We kind of started from scratch and rebuilt a lot of our social presence around us, where we just shared a lot of things we cared about when it came to whether that's like Asian food, our upbringing, those first generation immigrants, our culture. And I think we got a lot more engagement. It just felt a lot more natural. People really bought into our founder story, our journey. And that's really been, I think, a core part of the brand identity since. We still run a lot of even just founder ads. A lot of our emails have early gifts of our days in the kitchen, just formulating without knowing what we were doing. Next year, we're going to evolve our brand identity once again. I think the first 5 years were really about building in consumers' minds this idea that, hey, this new subcategory of ramen exists. It is healthy. Our main copy on our website is surprisingly healthy instant ramen, because it's kind of a little bit of a shock factor. People are like, wait a second, instant ramen always is guilty. It's not supposed to be healthy. And I think now that we have really established this healthy framing in people's minds and let them understand there is actually a category and product that exists. Now it's like, okay, how do we reach these net new audiences, maybe in like middle America, who perhaps like have, maybe they've even seen Immi, but they've thought to themselves, oh, well, healthy ramen, that's not something I'm interested in. And so you'll start to see us lead more with either like taste forward, crave forward kind of positioning. Um, and part of that obviously has to match the expectations of people's tastes, but we release pretty much a new version of the product every single year at this point, and so we've closed that gap quite a bit now. And from a lot of our panel testing, we're pretty much like, we're getting closer to these golden standards of instant ramen, the traditional unhealthy ones.
Kevin, I think from a prior conversation, you told me about the evolution of the product positioning, that increase in protein. I think maybe originally it was more focused around healthy, but lower carb. And then kind of this protein factor was added kind of after the fact as the market trend started to progress further. Am I remembering that correctly? And maybe talk about that product evolution along with the brand evolution.
When we started the brand, I think we launched, I think it was like January 2021. At the time, the idea of the extreme lifestyle was still very much in vogue. You can think of, at the time, I think keto was like the biggest, fastest growing trend. You had Atkins, paleo, um, honestly, pretty restrictive diets. They typically are like, you have to follow certain macro requirements, cut certain types of foods. And I think what has naturally happened over the past 5 years, both with COVID kind of forcing people to think about their diets. You had obviously all the health influencers growing very rapidly in podcasting, the Andrew Huberman of the world. You have GLP-1 now. Naturally, it's just like, okay, people are more aware of what's required to live a healthier lifestyle. But I think there's just more of a shift from the extremes back towards just like a balance. And so, one of the things we learned is when we started this brand, actually most brands in general in consumer, the goal is to live long enough to be able to ride some sort of hyper consumer trend. And you'll see this day in, day out for whether you're in apparel, whether you're in food and beverage. Like, as long as you have the unit economics and like to sustain and stay alive, sooner or later, some hyper trend will happen, whether influenced by pop culture or a celebrity, just generally consumer behavior changing. And when that mega trend happens, you just hold on to dear life. And that's, I guess what in tech you would say is true product market fit. It's almost like, I think it wasn't me who said this, but there was another founder of another like protein bar company said, you kind of want the value props, the surface area of your value props to be wide enough to be able to latch on to whatever hyper consumer trend is happening at the time. So when we first formulated the product, we knew we wanted it to be low carb just because our families are, my grandmother's pre-diabetic, and that was actually pretty important. But for the other ancillary benefits, whether that's like high protein, high fiber, plant-based, I would argue those are a little bit more opportunistic for us, where we said, okay, we know these are generally good for humanity. Like we've done enough of our own scientific research, but we're not sure how important they are. But at some point, there's going to be some hyper trend just because trends come and go, there are fads or whatever, but one of these will hit. And so all of those were included in the product. Now, the problem was, when you include all these different value props, you suddenly hit certain constraints from food physics where you can you obviously have to you have to sacrifice on taste and texture somewhere to get all those different value props. And I think the journey over the past 5 years has been understanding which value props are worth laxing a little bit to then get that taste and texture boost, which will grow your repeat purchase, your word of mouth. And a lot of that fine tuning is not necessarily letting go of our principles. Like our product today is still high protein, lower carb, lower sodium, high fiber, you name it. But we haven't been as restrictive in the exact grammage. Like it must be below 10 grams this, must be above 15 grams this. It's kind of just allowed us the flexibility to ebb and flow based on what we believe the market is demanding at this time. So, for example, we just started flowing in a new version of Immi. We won't do the public announcement yet because technically we're doing that in about 2 months. But you can actually find it in some retailers now, and you'll notice that it is higher in protein. And part of that is because everything is, I think even my own mom is looking for more protein. She has osteoporosis, so her doctor has very specifically said you are not supplementing with enough protein in your diet. And this is not just one individual. I mean, I think everywhere you look at every single category now, even the incumbents are trying to throw protein in everything. So that's just, I think what we've learned is you have to listen to the market. You can only everyone has found their ego and how they want to drive product direction. You all want to Steve Jobs it all the way, but at some point the market will demand something. And, I think you have to be willing to let go of some of that ego to match what the market wants.
The following message is brought to you by Fulfill, a sponsor of the podcast. You can have a fast-growing brand, solid margins, and still kill your exit because your financials are a mess. As a buyer, we've seen deals fall apart because the books are too messy, COGS are wrong, and ops couldn't explain the inventory delta. We've also seen brands have to pay up for clean, GAAP-compliant numbers with real operational visibility. That's where Fulfill.io comes in. Fulfill is the ERP for Shopify merchants who are thinking ahead, built with a financial lens from day one. You get a single source of truth for ops and accounting, including GAAP-compliant revenue recognition, accurate landed COGS across channels, native integrations with Shopify, Amazon, 3PLs, and more. Brands like Ridge, Hexclad, Cuts, and Boom Boom already run Fulfill because it gives them investor-ready financials and real-time inventory visibility. So if you're planning to raise, sell, or just run your brand like an acquirer would, go to fulfill.io. Your P&L will thank you, and so will your future buyer. For the maybe non-food brand builders who are comparing notes of how they think about product development in other categories, whether it being in beauty or apparel, etc., I'm curious, in food, the technical challenges, you talked about the kind of food physics, how you and your team getting into the technical challenges of the food development, or is it you're more relying on a third party, a co-man, et cetera?
So I think the first thing I'll say is we have never claimed to be a food tech company. I think at the end of the day, we're building a food brand, and let's not kid ourselves. That we're not inventing new proteins from scratch. We are simply taking combinations of ingredients that people have not tried before, and applying them to an existing food category that has existed for over 60 years. So I'm not going to try to hype up anything we're doing on the food science side. I put that in quotations because that's really not what we're doing. That being said, my co-founder and I did take a lot of effort in the early years to actually do a lot of the formulation ourselves. I think one reason was there just wasn't anyone who was willing to work with us. A lot of the so-called food scientists, food experts, noodle experts, I think there's just a lot of, I think when you work in an industry long enough, you develop a lot of doubt around whether true innovation can happen in that industry. It happens to everyone. And so we really had no choice where we were like, okay, well, I guess no one really believes this can be created. We kind of have to figure this out. So it was really that 0 to 1 process that kind of taught us, "Hey, we don't necessarily need to listen to the experts in the industry. We can kind of become the experts just by figuring out how to innovate from 0 to 1." And so that's really predicated, I think, a lot of this company process over the past 5 years is we typically do all the R&D ourselves. Now we actually have, a product development team based in LA. They kind of work out of this, um, I was telling Fan earlier, this apartment they've converted into this mini lab space, and it's very reminiscent of like a startup where, there's nothing fancy, like fancy crazy equipment. It's just we're literally like in there hacking ourselves, trying all sorts of ingredients, trying different processes of cooking processes, developing these small scale benchtop tests that we then funnel to our various co-mans who and these co-mans do have much larger R&D teams, but we have found that you can circumvent a lot of the time required on the R&D side if you do a lot of the initial formulation yourselves and just have them do the fine tuning.
Fascinating. Maybe we'll move from kind of brand and product to channel. What's your take on subscription for CPG food, for Immi? Does ramen lend itself to the same repeat behavior as, coffee or bars?
Yeah, I think that it's highly dependent on your category. I think that ramen, as much as we love to paint it as a snack or whatever, it's a meal. Um, and the not so fun part of working in the food industry, I would argue, is that sometimes it does feel like a zero sum game where you are fighting for stomach share amongst people. And maybe in tech or whatever, and social media, it's all about like attention share. But for us, yeah, you eat a bowl of ramen that constitutes an entire meal, and the likelihood that you're going to eat ramen 3 times a day, 7 days a week without getting bored is virtually impossible unless you truly, truly love this stuff. So I think with that in mind, I think we knew out the gate that yes, there was going to be some percentage that will convert to subscribers, but if we're shipping you 6 packets of Immi in a variety pack, or even 12 packets, like, are you going to be able to eat through that, every 2 weeks or every month? I don't know. I mean, that'd be awesome. We would love for you to do that. But the thing I've learned over the years, even with like our retention team, is a retention team, even on D2C for your particular food category, can only move the needle so much. You typically are hitting some sort of local maximum. And it's not because of how amazing your retention efforts are on the strategic or tactical side. It's just you're fighting against this like psychological element of like consumers just get kind of bored of eating the same thing every day. And there are certain snacks, certain types of food supplements, and obviously that like, you can get around that. But for ramen, I think it's a little bit different. So um, we've really never like kidded ourselves around that. We still put a lot of effort into our retention efforts and subscription program. But I think we were running some sort of analysis the other day. Like, we actually checked, like, okay, out of all of our cohorts in the past year on a monthly basis, what percentage of one-time customers are we able to convert to become subscribers within a 30, 60, 90-day window? And I think it's like by day 90, it's like 2%. It's like, it's really difficult to actually get someone, a first-time or just a one-time purchaser, to convert to subscriber. Now, outside of the one-time purchasers, I think we have actually a decent hit rate where it's like, if you are purchasing for the first time, something like 8 to 10% of those will actually purchase as a subscription first, which I was surprised by. But again, like maybe 40% of those people are probably just shopping for discounts and intend to cancel after the first purchase. So we like pretty regimentedly study all of these things just because we love our subscription program. It's great LTV, but like we want to be very realistic of, our level of efforts, the expectations, the benchmarks in the industry. And instead, what we do, like most food and beverage brands, is we attempt to push that repeat purchase into retail where customers are okay purchasing 1 to 2 packets at a time on their weekly grocery run. They don't feel compelled to like have this subscription program running where they have to purchase a 6 or 12 pack at a time, the super crazy high AOV. And you just hope that your cohorts are stacking in your retail where your velocities are moving up and to the right. And that's generally what I think what most brands end up doing over time.
Do many people eat Immi as a complement to kind of an accessory of other dishes? Like as an Asian person, I would have rice on average 1.5 times a day, but obviously as a supplement. Are people having Immi just by itself and that's the kind of full plate, or is it in an assortment?
So we have found from our user interviews, it really depends on the like persona of the customer. And we have a couple different personas. I would say that typically most people are not just eating Immi as like the sole meal. They usually add at least one topping. And that's probably like an egg. It's probably like a handful of veggies. Actually, the most requested product from our top D2C customers, we reached out to like 200 of our top D2C customers, interviewed them on Zoom, and literally was like, "Oh, can you guys provide like a bag of vegetable toppings?" Because we hate it when like we open a ramen packet, a ramen cup, there's like three pieces of carrots and like two pieces of shrimp. So we have this huge bag of veggie toppings just dried, and it's like our top three D2C seller. Um, we're in like 1,000 retail doors after like 6 months of launching the product, and people just love it. And it's like an easy way to just add a bunch of vegetables without even thinking about it. So there's definitely like that cohort. What's interesting is we also have this like health conscious cohort. And I would say of the health conscious cohort, some are just like obviously like maybe like they're my mom, they're trying to supplement some protein in their diet. Some are hair on fire needs. They might be diabetics, PCOS, where they will just eat Immi by itself because it really is like a full meal. I think at this point, it's only 350 calories, but you're getting like north of 25 grams of protein, like 12 grams of fiber. It's very substantial for a meal, and you're gonna feel generally like full for hours, especially if you are, like maybe you're like a female who just doesn't eat as much as like a typical male working professional, and we found that just like more than enough for them.
You started D2C, you've moved into retail. You mentioned that you're even selling veggies into retail. Maybe talk about kind of what you've learned about channel mix.
Learned so much. My co-founder and I, because we came from tech, we naturally felt inclined to launch D2C first. We thought that our strengths from tech would lend itself well to e-com. And I think to a certain extent, it's definitely helped. We've been able to stay contribution margin positive on our D2C business on first purchase for quite some time. Naturally, like D2C gets more and more expensive every year. You're finding more competition. You're pushing a boulder up the hill where you're constantly searching for new ad platforms and looking for arbitrage that inevitably will run out. And I think that, like most brands, we kind of quickly realized, okay, well, you have to diversify to Amazon. You're going to capture that kind of spillover search intent slash it's just going to be a naturally more profitable business than D2C over time, as long as you're ranking well in search. And then retail, wholesale, alt channels like convenience, military, whatever, those end up being your bread and butter that you kind of have to like shift most of the business towards over time because you just don't reacquire the customers. And they're bringing that foot traffic to you. Um, I think that it's been a huge cultural shift for us because the first 3-ish years was so D2C Amazon focused, and we really built a lot of our growth and marketing teams around that. That now that we're shifting aggressively into wholesale, and we're in about 6,000 doors. We're going to expand hopefully to like many more thousand next year. How do you do your marketing attribution, where a lot of your marketing efforts may not necessarily be measured from a digital perspective, but it's clearly lifting velocities in retail. Like, how do you shift that your MMM model accordingly? How do you culturally do org management, like change management internally, where you want to make sure that the D2C Amazon retention teams are still motivated when they're seeing so much of the business shift to wholesale? And C is just like, how do you learn wholesale faster? Because it's all these unknown unknowns where like there's all the lingo, there's different types of trade spend, these hidden deductions that like are eating away at your margins. And that's been like a fun part of the journey, but also not so fun in many ways because it's just so different from D2C. The feedback loop is so slow. And a lot of the standard marketing techniques you would use to get like an immediate feedback loop of like pure attribution from like ad to conversion, you're now like fighting to see if you can tie that straight line, and it's just like $1 trillion problem that we are fighting to resolve internally.
D2C founders, are you bleeding cash before your customers ever see your products? You spend months shipping items, your inventory sits idle, and your margins evaporate in logistics. What if you could slash your lead times and reclaim your cash flow? Meet Portless, the next-gen direct fulfillment platform built for high-growth e-commerce. They don't just store products, they ship directly from China and Vietnam to your customer's front door with a fully local delivery experience, skipping ports, cuttling handling, and making your inventory available for sale in days, not months. Portless offers up to 90% lower inventory lead times by removing middlemen and optimizing routes. A dramatic acceleration of cash flow because inventory is back on sale within 48 hours of manufacturing, reduced inventory risk because there's no need to overproject demand, and true global reach because you ship to 55 countries using domestic last-mile carriers. Now here's the promise. Switch to Portless and you're no longer paying for inefficiencies. Go to portless.com, get a free quote, and see how you can reinvent your supply chain. Don't let logistics throttle your brand's growth. Try Portless. Real speed, real savings, real scale. How have you thought about how much you want to lean into supporting retail? I think there is a little bit of the, hey, we're going to try to maximize the margin from retail because we want it to be more profitable, versus the like, hey, we're happy for the first 2 to 3 years of retail to be loss leaders because we're going to over support with direct and indirect spend so that the channel grows and, have the J curve even in the retail channel. Like, yeah, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that the first 2 years that we started retail, we actually weren't this disciplined in the same way that we are on D2C and Amazon. And part of that was because we didn't have the data sources in place. Like, yes, everyone refers to SPINS. It's kind of like a monopoly on grocery data, and you'd only really get the output like every month too. So it's like it's kind of a lagging indicator of a lot of your marketing efforts. But even beyond that, like I mentioned before, there's deductions management, which all these distributors are like trying to charge you back for all these hidden fees and potentially fraudulent things that they're just trying to take money from you. And we've caught a lot of fraud, frankly. And we didn't have a lot of these hooks in place to be able to measure, okay, like if we are investing in this promotion, and in retail, they call it trade marketing, which is like the same thing as just like marketing dollars in D2C. But, we might have like a promotion calendar of like, okay, at Whole Foods, we're going to run, this temporary price discount of like $1 off on this month and do this here. And there wasn't an easy feedback loop to say, oh, well, hey, we know that we get this percentage lift. We know that our baseline velocity grows this much after we run a couple of these. Therefore, we can measure true ROI. And the funny thing is, I talk to $100 million plus brands, their sales teams, their CEOs all day long, and no one really seems to have measured this scientifically. Like the other day, I was talking to this 100 mil brand VP of sales, and I was like, so what's your like ROI benchmark? Your baseline minimum ROI you need to see after this type of TPR. And he's like, honestly, we don't really measure it. We know we see a lift. And I'm like, oh, that's like shocking. But at the same time, I have to learn from that because this guy's not a dumb guy. Like, he's very metrics driven. But hey, maybe that's like me searching for the silver bullet, when in reality, like, again, going back to the MMM, it's like when you start shifting wholesale, you no longer are like conversion ROI focus. There must be you almost start shifting to like an awareness play where you're like, how do I drive the lowest CPMs, get the most awareness? Because those eyeballs will go purchase in retail, but you can't like directly attribute it. I have to make that mental shift. And I'm still almost like thinking like a D2C operator when I ask these types of questions and expecting these answers. And I think to a certain extent that may even have held us back in growing faster in retail because of this question you asked, Fan, because I'm always like thinking, oh, well, if I'm going to give budget to like marketing to run this like wholesale awareness play campaign, like I expect this ROI, this percentage lift to pay it back. But maybe that's not the right way to approach retail. And I'm still trying to learn that every day.
Speaking of budget, Immi has raised money from VCs. Pitching ramen as an investable category doesn't seem easy, but you were able to get it done. Yeah, talk about kind of raising money for Immi.
I think there were a couple of reasons why investors got really excited about Immi specifically. One, especially in like the early years, it was really this idea of like I think our founder narrative, like people always say it's like, the founder market fit or whatever. Like there was like a certain element of, okay, hey, here's Kevin and Kevin, you know, known each other for 10 years, worked together, both were in product managers and VCs. And then also, okay, their families were in the food industry because our grandparents, like my grandparents are produce farmers. Kei-chan's grandparents ran like a noodle stall in Thailand. There was like this narrative element that was like, oh, okay, that's easy to follow, seem like competent people. They could probably take their operating systems from tech and bring it over to food and beverage. I think that was like one piece of the puzzle. The second piece of the puzzle was, hey, this market is like crazy big. It's instant ramen is like a $56 billion market globally, of which something like 4 to 8 billion of that is domestic in the US and even has like doubled in size post COVID. And now it's growing even faster because you have brands like Bulldog, who are just going viral on TikTok and are just moving so quickly in grocery aisles. And then the third piece was, hey, these guys are actually trying to innovate because if you looked at instant ramen as a category, it's extremely sleepy. The formulas haven't changed since the product has been invented 60 years ago. Now these guys are coming in saying they're going to make it low carb, high protein, high fiber, plant based. It's like, okay, well, now I'm applying this mental model of like true innovation in a stale category, big market, competent founders. Does that lead to success? Maybe. Now, who's to say like they could be making the dumbest investments of their time? I hope not, but we're still figuring it out. But I think when you think about fundraising, it's like you generally want to have those pieces in place. There is, of course, the element of why now too, which I think that was like a big piece that I missed. And I think the way we solved the why now was this confluence of events happening at the time. One was this idea that because of COVID, you have a lot of people caring a lot about their health and wellness and being more interested. And then you had like Asian culture, like I think in media, music, whatever, like there was a big shift happening. And like I know it sometimes sounds like a stretch to say, oh, well, like, okay, there's more Asian films, there's more like Asian music. How does that actually translate? Well, I mean, I give this example all the time. I even pitch this in retail meetings. Like when we interview our customers and we ask them, why did you pick Immi? They will literally say like, oh, well, I was watching this like Korean drama and I saw these people eating this thing called ramen, but I have like a health condition. So I typed healthy ramen. You were the first thing to show up on Google search results. It's like, that is actually a very clear correlation of something happening in pop culture or in your personal life, changing your taste perception or like creating an interest or a hook for you to want to try a new product you've never tried before. And this is happening constantly in America. Not to mention, I always say this too. It's like Asian flavors are fairly diverse. Like if you look at the Sichuan province in China, they have codified 24 flavor building blocks. Whereas like if you look at a lot of American flavors, it's like typically people are listing like maybe 8 different tastes. It's not as like apples to apples, but it's like, okay. And then also like Asia grows something like 70% of like the world's global spice count. So you just have more of like an encyclopedia of ingredients to work with. So naturally you just get these like huge diverse range of flavors. And then once you try it, it's like really hard to go back. So I think when you thought about the confluence of like health and wellness, Asian culture, there's this feeling of like, okay, I can see the story of like why this is happening now versus if we tried to start this 10 years ago, like you might get like one piece of that picture, health and wellness, but you might not get the Asian culture piece. And that's what I'm talking about like you have to ride some sort of macro hyper trend in consumer because the timing matters so much. It's not like there haven't been healthy Asian food companies in the past. It's just they didn't have the right timing. Time will tell if we even had the right timing, but I think we're doing well, but we'll see. So
the tongue numbing flavor of Sichuan peppers is maybe not in the American food block.
Yeah, 50 hertz is the frequency it vibrates.
And hopefully, maybe K-pop Demon Hunters gets some more young audiences asking their parents about more food flavors.
Yes, definitely.
Food margins are notoriously tight. Does it have to be that way? Often when we've even seen income statements, a lot of D2C native brands try to target 60, 70% product margins, 50% kind of gross margins after shipping and fulfillment. When we've seen food stuff, it's usually 15 to 20 points lower than that. So, pretty material difference. Yeah, maybe talk about margins in food.
So a lot of that does also depend on channel mix. I think you're absolutely correct that on D2C, and it's not exclusive to just food and beverage, fulfillment alone these days is probably going to be even more than your product COGS, which is kind of insane. Um, I think with food and beverage, yes, you are dealing with certain food physics laws where certain ingredients just have a certain base cost. Where if you truly want to, and this happens all the time in Better For You, because in Better For You, it's all about premium priced companies using more expensive, higher quality ingredients. There's only so much you can fine tune. There's only so much you can achieve economies of scale on certain Better For You, higher quality ingredients before you kind of hit this floor of like, okay, if I go below this, I am willingly, morally, like going to sacrifice on some quality and lose on my positioning or my consumer trust of like how healthy this product is going to be. And this is the kind of the dilemma that most of these like food conglomerates have gone through over the past, couple of decades, where maybe they did start with some healthier products and then they realized like, oh God, the only way I'm going to shave off a couple of cents here and there is to use food dyes and artificial ingredients. So, I think I also didn't come up with this. I think my friend Justin Mayers made this quote, which is like, for every like the margin that like a food company or food startup has is effectively like every time you shave that down sorry, every time you increase that margin, that's like the percentage you're cutting into a consumer's health effectively. And I actually think this is true. Now, having been in the Better For You space for so many years, it's like, yeah, you kind of like, if you want that extra margin, it will come at the cost of the consumer's health. Like there's like, until we have some sort of extremely novel food science where someone is like truly inventing a scalable new food molecule, yeah, there's going to be a hit. So on the consumer's health. And so you as a company, this is why like in the very first part of this interview, I talked about this idea of like brand positioning. Like that's really the only way to combat that, because it sucks, right? It's like I would love to figure out how to get more economies of scale somewhere, but at a certain point, like there's only so many levers you can optimize to get the lowest possible price. And when you think about that in the context of like the channel mix, it's like, well, D2C, we kind of know that every year, your meta costs are going to increase like 15, 20%. It's inevitable. Well, there's no way you're going to cut down your COGS that much every single year unless you're like a godlike operations company. And even then, like at some point, there's a diminishing curve. So wholesale, fine. Like if wholesale, the retailers are acquiring the customers for you, they're driving the foot traffic. Yeah, I can bear with that. I can eat into my margin a little bit more. I can be okay with a couple of points of margin. But even in wholesale, they typically say, yeah, if you're not north of 30%, you're basically in danger zone. And 40% is kind of that golden standard. And maybe as you branch out to like full retail chain distribution on Walmart or whatever, you can lower that and you can still win on the volume game. But yeah, it's definitely difficult, and because of food physics, it's just the beast that it's just the truth of the matter. And I think this is actually something a lot of food entrepreneurs who are entering the industry don't realize, because they come in with these bold claims like, oh yeah, we have this like super healthy product and we're going to crush the incumbents. And then over the years, you're like, wait a second, like I might have to become like the incumbent if I'm going to be able to like price at a point, like find the optimal price point to like reach that critical mass of like volume and scale. And that's like a moral dilemma I think every food founder is going to go through.
AI. Everyone's talking about it, and you're worried you're getting left behind. Meet RichPanel, an AI-first customer support platform that's built for one thing: making support faster, smarter, and cheaper for e-commerce brands. Something you can actually feel smarter about using. RichPanel combines a unified inbox across email, chat, and socials, a customizable self-service portal that customers actually use, and Sidekick AI, powered by GPT-4, which learns from your past tickets to suggest on-brand replies. Does it actually work? Well, with Rich Panel's guarantee, you get guaranteed 30% cost savings when you switch from Zendesk or Gorgeous, 30% automation to reduce your ticket volume, and a no-risk guarantee that if Rich Panel doesn't deliver those results in 60 days, you get a full refund. That's why top brands like Ridge Wallet, Jones Road Beauty, and Pella Cases are already using Rich Panel to save hundreds of thousands in support costs. Time to start letting AI work for you. Head to richpanel.com and start your free trial today. Real savings, real automation, real AI that actually works. Maybe some of it is offset by the stable of powerhouse celebrities you've been able to get as investors and ambassadors. I think I saw Naomi Osaka, Patrick Schwarzenegger, Usher. How did these come to be?
It is a very interesting kind of sequencing. The thing that Kitchen and I always knew was we never wanted a single celebrity to be the face of our brand. I think over the years, there's been a lot of brands who've deliberately picked up a celebrity as a pseudo co-founder, chief creativity officer, whatever you want to call it, effectively the user acquisition driver of the business for very low cost. And I think that does work for certain like celebrity aligned brands. For us, we were always wary of the systemic risk of celebrities getting canceled and just giving like not caring after a while because they just get busy. They have a ton of projects. So if we were to ever bring on a celebrity as an investor, it would have to specifically be because there's some element of their persona that really aligns with the product or the company. And I think, when you look at like Usher, for example, his son is a type 1 diabetic and he very much cared about the product. He actually enjoys the product. His family likes the product. Like that's not like a made up quote, like it's something he actually said. And he's very passionate. Like he spends a lot of time with, diabetes nonprofits. So I think there was like a strong alignment there. Sorry, my humidifier is just running, so you can see some smoke for anyone not watching on video. But and then Naomi Osaka, I think she was becoming a mother. She was really caring about the future of like, her inevitable like children's diets. And she's also, she comes from Japanese heritage. So as long as we've found that alignment, we've been able to convince ourselves, hey, this is someone we'd want to bring on board. That being said, we're not delusional in that celebrities will never build the business, and I don't think they should. And so we've never relied on them to do anything. But apart from the alignment, the one thing we also realized when we started this food company was there's not much defensible IP in the food and beverage industry. If an incumbent really wanted to, they could probably create your formula in the span of weeks. Now, building that brand is a different question, but if you don't have defensible IP, well, what really is defensible? And yeah, brand, like it's typically these intangibles. And well, how do you build brand, right? It's like, okay, well, you have like product consistency, you have like positioning, you have, frankly, like this mimetic kind of like, okay, well, what are other people around you saying about the brand and the product? And I think that mimetic piece is really like this third element that we were like, hey, how can we solidify that, right? How can we make it so that in mainstream culture, people are talking about Immi as if it's the de facto instant ramen that you should be buying. And like it or not, influencers, celebrities still kind of guide a lot of the mainstream decisions because it comes top down in that regard. And so we always felt, hey, if we can get different celebrities from different industries to love the product, be mission aligned with it, and then speak about it, that could help create the narrative, create that mimetic desire that would influence people to always think of Immi first when they're in their grocery or they're talking to their friend about the new ramen that everyone should be eating. Whether that thesis plays out, we'll see. But I think it's one data point that like it should help, but it's not going to bring the company to 100 mil or something. If that's what anyone's listening is hoping.
Kevin, as we head towards a wrap, what's been the single biggest win of the last 12 months? Whether that's product, channel, campaign, something else.
Biggest win. I mean, this year has been very interesting in that my co-founder and I had a feeling because kind of prior to being elected that tariffs would be a huge part of his platform. we got this feeling about 2 years ago that we needed to diversify and get out of China, which was our primary kind of co-man location. And so I don't know if we just got very lucky with our timing. I think usually that is most of startups is just getting very lucky with timing. We were able to effectively like diversify the majority of our most popular SKUs out of China um, earlier this year. We still have some remaining SKUs that we're still trying to get out, but I think had we not have taken the initiative to do that, we'd be in a pretty terrible position right now. And time will tell if the tariffs even just get repealed and we end up just getting our money back. But we're not banking on that. And I have a couple friends who weren't in that fortunate position to be able to shift out that quickly, and it's obviously done a huge toll on the business. So when I think of like fortunate or great things, it's not anything splashy. It's just, okay, from an operation standpoint, we did the hard work, the non-sexy work behind the scenes to just like figure out how to migrate our supply chain to a less risky geopolitical, area that hopefully will shelter us at least for the next couple of years until we may need to adapt again. And these are like the not so fun things that I think a lot of the consumer brands won't ever talk about, but really are like the backbone of the entire business. So I think very, very grateful for that.
And earlier you talked about more doors, a new product already on some shelves. Is there something that you're especially excited about for the next 12 to 18 months?
There are some pretty major retail launches that we are announcing, I think probably end of this month. A couple that we are targeting early next year. So I think right now Immy's in this great place where we have a lot of momentum. We're a much more well-known brand than before. We still have a lot of work ahead of us to become truly mainstream. But there is this playbook from a wholesale perspective of, okay, now like we got to make sure that the data story looks good. We got to find those J curves and then convince more of these conventional retailers to take us on. And that's probably what I would be most excited about. And outside of that, from a product innovation standpoint, we've learned not to diversify our SKUs too quickly. I think that can be the death knell of most brands, especially like early startup founders who think, hey, it's kind of cool to have like tons of different SKUs and flavors. I think a prime example I always talk about is like the popular shoe brand Greats. I mean, that founder, he had a bunch of SKUs of different sizes, and his next company was Jolie, which was like a single shower head. Like there's no other SKU. And he learned the hard way. He was like, nah, I'm not doing that again. Like one SKU only. So we think about that a lot. And we don't want to, I think people are always like, oh, what are you going to have like a ton new flavors or all this stuff? And we're like, no, we're going to kind of slow roll it. We will let our customers demand it from us. And we'll continue keeping a close eye with our user interviews, user insights to see, okay, what is a truly complementary product like the veggie toppings where we've almost de-risked it so much that we just know that when we launch it, it's going to do well. Those are the types of launches we're most excited about. Most are hush-hush right now, but expect some things next year.
Is there anything you're looking for from listeners, channel partners, collaborators, investors to accelerate Immy's next phase?
Always looking for new channel partners from a distribution standpoint. If you're a grocery buyer listening to this, we'd love to chat, of course. If you're like an alternative channel that we may not even have thought about, a college campus, things like that. Like we have many, many SKUs, including our instant ramen cup lines that work really well there. Beyond that, always looking to speak to great people. Our D2C side is still growing, and we're always looking for smart folks. So if you're like if you're a smart, motivated growth person, wants to be surrounded by other kind of growth-minded folks who care very deeply about their work, we're always open to chatting.
Thanks so much for coming on and look forward to next time.
Thanks so much for having me.